When my wife decided to divorce me after 15 years together, I didn't utter a word of protest, just quietly signed the papers. Meanwhile, she was enjoying a cheerful dinner with her lover at Bella Not, the restaurant we once cherished. I approached their table, offering a gentle smile. "Congratulations, you're free now," I said, softly placing an envelope in her hand. Instantly, Catherine's smug smile vanished as she read the DNA test results inside. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The heady scent of jasmine on a white silk handkerchief. That's what shattered my marriage. Not with a scream or a fit of rage, but with the silent horror of discovery. I stood frozen in the expansive closet of our Belltown apartment, hands trembling as I held Catherine's navy fur coat. I remember that moment vividly. Tuesday morning, 9:17. Liam and Sophie were at school, Noah at basketball practice. I was gathering clothes for the dry cleaners when I noticed Catherine's gym bag tucked behind her row of glossy high heels. The zipper was slightly open, revealing a crumpled handkerchief. She'd said she used it during an emergency surgery last night. But the jasmine scent wasn't hers. Catherine only wore bergamot, and I knew that well. Our luxurious Belltown apartment, with its wide windows overlooking Puget Sound, once symbolized our perfect marriage. I, David Harper, a former teacher, had sacrificed my career to care for Liam, Sophie, and Noah, so Catherine could shine as a neurosurgeon at St. Clair Medical Center. We were called the ideal family, with me behind the scenes, managing our lives so she could save others. But lately Catherine had changed. She came home late, eyes glued to her phone, voice icy when I asked questions. "Complicated, sir," she'd say, but her evasive gaze unnerved me. At St. Clair parties, she called me the perfect house husband, with a mocking smile, making colleagues chuckle. I brushed it off, thinking it was the stress of her life-saving work. But deep down, I felt a crack forming. That evening, with the kids asleep, Catherine walked into the living room, still in her green surgical scrubs. She didn't look at me, just said bluntly, "David, I want a divorce. I've outgrown this life. Outgrown you. I'm 40. If I'm going to start over, it's now." Her voice was sharp as a blade, unwavering. "Ethan, he's my future." Ethan Caldwell, the ambitious young doctor at St. Clair she always praised openly. I was stunned, sucked into a black void. The image of the handkerchief flashed in my mind, confirming the painful truth. But instead of exploding, I nodded silently, voice hoarse. I agree. Confronting her now was pointless. I needed evidence, the truth. I knew Catherine and Ethan were celebrating at Bella Not, the Italian restaurant, where we marked our anniversaries. With its golden lights and soft opera music, I pictured myself walking in, placing an envelope of proof on their table. But first, I had to uncover the secret. Catherine was hiding, watching Liam, Sophie, and Noah sleep peacefully. I felt a fire ignite in my chest. They were my reason for living, the reason I built this family. The handkerchief in my hand was the first piece of a larger lie. I wasn't just fighting for myself, but for my kids, for the 15 years I'd sacrificed. With a heavy heart but steely resolve, I vowed to expose Catherine, no matter the cost. I stood in the darkened living room, the lights of Puget Sound twinkling through the window, but they couldn't dispel the darkness in my heart. The white silk handkerchief, with its alien jasmine scent, still haunted me. It wasn't just proof of Catherine's affair. It was the first crack in the perfect picture of our marriage. As Liam, Sophie, and Noah slept soundly in their rooms, I let my mind drift back to the early days, searching for answers. When did it all start to fracture? I met Catherine in college, when I was a passionate teacher and she was a medical student with blazing ambition in her eyes. I loved her determination, willingly giving up my classroom dreams to support her through grueling years of med school. When Catherine became a neurosurgeon at St. Clair Medical Center, I stayed home to raise Liam, Sophie, and Noah, turning our Belltown apartment into a haven so she could focus on saving lives. We were called the ideal family. Catherine with her golden touch in the OR, me with my quiet dedication. At St. Clair parties, she'd loop her arm through mine, raise a champagne flute, and say, "I couldn't do it without David." Her colleagues smiled, but I caught the pitying looks from their wives. They thought I was lesser, merely Catherine's shadow. Looking back, I saw the signs I'd chosen to ignore. Catherine started working late more often, about 2 years ago. "Hospital's short-staffed," she'd say, but I noticed she stopped sharing stories about her surgeries. She slept in a separate room, claiming exhaustion after 18-hour procedures. Evenings when I prepared her favorite meal, steak with red wine, she'd pick at it, eyes glued to her phone. When I tried to touch her, she'd brush me off, saying, "I'm drained, David." The Parker case is complicated. I bought concert tickets, reserved a table at Bella Knot, hoping to rekindle our spark, but she'd check her phone, responding to messages with a secretive smile I couldn't decipher. The starkest change was how she treated me, in front of others. At a party celebrating Catherine's promotion to head of neurosurgery, I threw a grand event at home, inviting her colleagues. She smiled and thanked me publicly, but later, in the kitchen, she hissed, "You embarrassed me with this tacky party." That night, she slept in the living room, saying she needed quiet. I called my sister, confiding about the growing distance. "Powerful women change, David," she warned. I dismissed it, thinking it was bitterness from her own failed marriage. I always believed in privacy, never checking Catherine's phone or emails. That was for the insecure, not me. David Harper, the ideal husband. But with our 15th anniversary approaching, I wanted to plan a trip to Napa Valley, where we'd honeymooned. I needed to sync our schedules, and Catherine's phone was on the kitchen counter while she showered. Just a quick glance at her calendar, I told myself. But a message popped up, from Ethan Caldwell. "Last night was amazing. When are you leaving him?" My fingers trembled as I opened the chat. Hundreds of messages, spanning 8 months, filled with love, intimate photos, and their plans. Catherine wrote, "David's planning an anniversary. Poor thing, he still thinks there's something to save." Ethan replied, "Let him dream. You're mine." I set the phone down silently, hands still making Catherine's coffee as usual. I kissed her cheek as she left, keeping my face calm. But once the door closed, my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the cold tile floor, pain gripping my chest, unable to speak. That night, I stood at the kids' bedroom doors, watching my 3 children sleep. Everything seemed peaceful, but for me, the world had shattered. It wasn't just losing Catherine. I'd lost the trust I'd built over 15 years. I decided to confront Catherine, not to salvage anything, but to gauge the depth of her deception. With the kids asleep, I waited in our bedroom, the room where we'd held each other through long nights, where I'd comforted her after failed surgeries, where we'd dreamed of Liam, Sophie, and Noah before turning to IVF. Catherine entered, still in her scrubs, eyes tired but sharp. I stood, voice eerily calm. "Are you sleeping with Ethan Caldwell?" She didn't flinch, just removed her watch, placing it on the nightstand with deliberate care. "Yes," she said, without a hint of remorse. "How long?" I asked. "Does it matter?" she replied, looking at me like a stranger. "I want a divorce, David. I've outgrown you this life." Her words cut like a knife, but what chilled me was the cruelty in her tone. This wasn't a confession, it was a verdict. "Why?" I whispered. She gave a bitter laugh, gesturing around the bedroom, as if it were a prison. "I save lives every day. And you, David, what do you do? Schedule Noah's basketball, fold Sophie's clothes. I gave you 15 years, the kids, this home. I'm 40. I want to live for myself." I stood there, feeling stripped of everything I'd believed in. I'd sacrificed my teaching career. She managed our family so she could shine. But to her, I was just a shadow house husband. That night, she slept in the living room, while I lay awake, replaying our 15 years, wondering if anything was real. The next morning, Catherine left before dawn, leaving a divorce lawyer's business card on the kitchen counter. I knew she wanted to end things quickly, but I wouldn't let her off easily. I started investigating, beginning with our finances, something Catherine always controlled. In the office safe, I found 15 years of records, taxes, investments, receipts. Flipping through bank statements, I spotted irregular withdrawals, $5,000, $7,500, sometimes $10,000, monthly, wired to a company called Pacific Ventures. No explanations, no paper trail. Over 2 years, nearly $250,000 had vanished. I called the bank, and after several denials, a clerk confirmed. Pacific Ventures was an LLC, registered solely in Catherine's name. The money trail ended there. I needed someone who knew St. Clair's inner workings, and I remembered Rachel Thornton, a doctor who'd worked with Catherine, but left 3 years ago, under mysterious circumstances. I tracked her down through 5 calls, and a wary secretary. We met at a small cafe, 40 miles from Seattle. Rachel, with prematurely gray hair and heavy eyes, looked at me as if she'd been expecting this meeting. "I knew this day would come," she said, her voice low. I just didn't think Catherine would destroy herself first. Over black coffee, she revealed a truth that chilled me. St. Clair's IVF clinic, where we'd conceived Liam, Sophie and Noah, was tainted. Rachel had found mismatched reports, swapped specimens. When she dug deeper, she learned Catherine and the clinic's director, Lawrence Bennett, had manipulated the IVF process. Fearing a hereditary neurological disorder in her family, Catherine had ordered my sperm replaced with a donor's to ensure perfect children. She knew, and she did it deliberately. I left the cafe with a USB drive of hospital records and a tip about a discreet DNA testing service. That night, with the kids asleep, I took hair samples from Liam, Sophie, and Noah's pillows, and a comb of mine from the bathroom. I sent them off, my heart heavy as lead. The 2 weeks of waiting were hell. Catherine accelerated the divorce, sending threatening letters from her lawyer, accusing me of instability, unfit to raise the kids. I kept up appearances, taking Noah to basketball, helping Sophie with homework, cheering Liam at his school play. But every night, I studied IVF fraud cases, grasping the horror of the truth. The DNA results arrived via email one morning. I opened the file, reading the cold words. The tested father is not the biological father of the children. Probability of paternity, 0%. I printed 3 copies, one for the lawyer, one for the safe, one for the envelope. I'd take to Bella Knott. My hands no longer shook. The pain had hardened into something resolute, icy. Catherine hadn't just cheated with Ethan. She'd stolen my fatherhood before our kids were even born. Catherine didn't just betray me with Ethan. She stole my fatherhood before Liam, Sophie, and Noah were born. Our Belltown apartment, once a haven, now felt like a stage for lies. I was no longer David Harper, the devoted house husband. I was a man on a mission to expose Catherine, not just for me, but for our kids, and the 15 years I'd sacrificed. The DNA envelope, locked in the safe, was my first weapon. But I needed more: evidence, allies, and an unforgiving plan. The next day, I contacted Emily Nguyen, a renowned Seattle divorce lawyer, dubbed the Slayer of Asset Division cases. We met at her downtown office, where floor-to-ceiling windows reflected Puget Sound's light. I placed the DNA results and Pacific Ventures statements on her mahogany desk. "Catherine's hiding something," I said, voice calm but firm. Emily, with thin-framed glasses and a razor-sharp gaze, reviewed the documents. "Untraceable transfers. A shell company. This screams hidden assets," she said. "But the IVF deception is bigger. We need original St. Clair records and proof Catherine knew about the sample swap." She instructed me to log everything: emails, texts, conversations, to build the case. I revisited the USB Rachel Thornton gave me, containing St. Clair's IVF record. But I needed more insider information, and Rachel suggested Sarah Mitchell, a former lab technician who worked at the IVF clinic for 12 years. I found Sarah through a mutual contact, and we met at her small apartment on Seattle's outskirts. The room was crammed with filing cabinets, like a secret archive. Sarah, hands slightly trembling, handed me a leather-bound notebook detailing patient names, sample swaps, and signatures from Catherine and Lawrence Bennett, the clinic director. "They thought I destroyed everything," she said, voice bitter. "I reported it, but the hospital, ethics board, even the police, all blocked. Catherine has powerful friends. I photographed every page, every signature, every suspicious note. One entry listed my name, dated to our IVF sessions. Sample swap per Dr. Walsh's directive. Reason: neurological disorder risk. No sample ID recorded." I began reaching out to other families who used St. Clair's IVF clinic around the same time. Rachel provided a list of 27 potentially affected couples. Most refused to talk, unwilling to question their children's origins. But 5 families agreed to meet: the Parkers, whose twins looked nothing like them; the Lees, whose daughter had a rare illness; and the Yuans, Trans, and Kims, who spoke of miracle successes after Bennett's personal involvement. "We were so grateful, we never questioned," Mrs. Kim said, tears streaming. Their stories fueled my resolve, but I needed concrete evidence to confront Catherine. I recorded every conversation with Catherine, trying to coax an admission. One evening, as she picked up the kids, I casually mentioned their health. "Sophie's eyes really look like yours," I said lightly. She smirked, eyes on her phone. "Good genes." I pressed further. "Ever worry they'd inherit a neurological disorder?" Rachel Thornton mentioned a genetic risk. Catherine snapped her head up, eyes flashing with anger. Rachel should shut up about things that don't concern her. "I checked the kids long ago. They're fine." "Checked without telling me?" I asked. "I'm their mother, a doctor." I decide for their health, she snapped. The recorder in my pocket captured every word. Her admission of the genetic risk, the secret checks, her hypocrisy. I contacted Mark Ellison, an FBI agent investigating medical fraud at St. Clair, through a number Sarah provided. We met at a diner near the waterfront. Mark, with a deep voice and keen eyes, said he'd been tracking St. Clair for 18 months, but lacked evidence to break their wall of silence. You're recording Sarah's files, and the DNA results are a strong start, he said. But I need more. Financial records, insider testimony, or a clear admission from Catherine or Bennett. I vowed to get what he needed, no matter the risk. I hired a private investigator to dig into Ethan Caldwell, suspecting he was more than a lover. The report stunned me. Ethan was the son of Margaret Caldwell, a patient who died 5 years ago due to Catherine's surgical error. St. Clair covered it up, blaming Margaret's medication. Ethan changed his surname, erased his tracks, and approached Catherine, first as a colleague, then a lover. His revenge was long planned, like mine now. I considered confronting him, even teaming up, but chose silence. My revenge had to be precise, unemotional. I kept up the facade of a compliant husband. At mediation, I nodded as Catherine proposed an unfair asset split, letting her think I was weak. She grew bolder, bringing Ethan to school events, even letting him stay over when the kids visited her new apartment. I quietly documented everything: texts, photos, records. Each step, I painted a complete picture of Catherine's lies, from Pacific Ventures to the IVF clinic. I knew the Pacific Medical Summit, where Catherine would receive the Doctor of the Year award, was approaching. That would be my stage, where I'd place the DNA envelope, not just at Bella Knott, but before the world. The DNA results were undeniable proof that Catherine had stolen my fatherhood, but I didn't let her see my weakness. Each day I took Liam to basketball, helped Sophie with homework, cheered Noah at his piano recital, as if our Belltown apartment was still a home. I knew Catherine was rushing the divorce, and I had to stay calm to protect Liam, Sophie, Noah, the kids I loved more than life, despite the truth about their origins tearing me apart. Catherine wasted no time. She hired an aggressive lawyer, sending threatening letters demanding full custody. At mediation, her lawyer, with a fake smile, accused me of financial and mental instability, unfit to raise 3 kids. Harper is just a house husband, with no steady income, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Catherine sat there, eyes cold, as if I were a discardable object. She offered a paltry alimony, barely enough to scrape by, and threatened to take the kids to her new apartment if I didn't comply. I nodded, feigning consideration, letting her think I'd surrendered. But in my mind, I counted the days to the Pacific Medical Summit, where I'd place the DNA envelope, not just at Bella Knott, but before the world. The pressure wasn't just from Catherine. Society weighed on me too. At school, other moms gave me pitying looks when Catherine and Ethan appeared together at Noah's recital. "Dr. Walsh is so busy, I'm sure you understand," one said, as if I were pathetic. Liam, more perceptive than I realized, asked one night, "Why is Mom always with Ethan? Doesn't she want to be with us anymore?" I hugged him, saying, "Mom's just busy, bud. Dad's always here." But my heart clenched. I couldn't let the kids know the truth, not yet. I had to shield them, even if it meant swallowing my pain daily. Legal costs drained me. Emily Nguyen, my lawyer, warned the case could drag on, and I was nearly bankrupt from the fees. Friends and family, instead of supporting me, urged me to give up. My brother, on a call, said, "Men have to be strong, David. Don't let divorce ruin the kids. Accept it for them." I listened, but didn't agree. I wasn't fighting for ego, but for Liam, Sophie, Noah, and for the truth Catherine had buried. Meanwhile, Sarah Mitchell, St. Clair's former lab technician, became an invaluable ally. I met her again at her apartment, where filing cabinets overflowed with secrets. Sarah handed me new documents, internal IVF clinic reports, showing Catherine and Lawrence Bennett took bribes from wealthy families for premium samples. A handwritten note from Bennett confirmed. Dr. Walsh requested sample swap for Harper case, ensuring no neurological risk. These were gold, but Sarah warned, "They know you're digging, David. Be careful." Her words chilled me. I recalled Pacific Ventures, the shell company Catherine funneled $250,000 into. If she caught me investigating, everything could collapse. That risk became real. One night, when I sneaked into Catherine's home office, where she kept some hospital documents, I was photographing a Pacific Ventures contract when I heard the door lock turn. Catherine was home early. I slammed the drawer shut, turned off the light, and hid behind a bookshelf. She entered, talking on the phone with Ethan. voice sharp. David's acting compliant, but I don't trust him. If he knows anything, we need to shut it down. My heart pounded, but she didn't spot me. When she left, I exhaled, knowing I was playing a dangerous game. I kept meeting Mark Ellison, the FBI agent, to strategize. He said Sarah's files and Catherine's recorded admission about the genetic risk were major steps, but he needed more. Current St. Clair staff testimony or documents tying Pacific Ventures to bribes. I promised to find it, no matter the risk. Every night, I researched IVF fraud online, reading about families discovering the truth decades later. But none matched ours, a wife deliberately ensuring her kids weren't her husband's, building a family on lies. I stood before the mirror in our Belltown apartment, adjusting the black suit Catherine once said, made me look like I'm trying too hard. The DNA envelope in my jacket pocket felt heavy, like a sentence. I was no longer David Harper, the scorned house husband. I was the one who'd tear down the web of lies Catherine wove for 15 years, for Liam, Sophie, Noah, and myself. Tonight, the truth would speak. I arrived at the downtown Seattle hotel hosting the Pacific Medical Summit, heart pounding but steps steady. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, filled with doctors, donors, and press, the Northwest's medical elite. I spotted Catherine instantly, near the stage, arm linked with Ethan Caldwell. She wore a crimson dress, the color of confidence, like the lipstick that started it all. Ethan, with a smug grin, chatted with St. Clair board members, unaware that 30 minutes early, I'd witnessed a closed-door meeting. Mark Ellison, the FBI agent, had presented my evidence to the board. DNA results, Sarah Mitchell's forged IVF record, Catherine's recorded admission about the genetic disorder, and Pacific Ventures documents. The board went from skeptical to shocked, then resolute. They contacted the prosecutor's office immediately, but Catherine was still clueless. She thought she'd claimed the Doctor of the Year award, her crowning glory. I slipped into the crowd, dodging pitying glances from colleagues' wives who'd seen me as Catherine's shadow. So brave of you to come, one whispered, voice dripping with sympathy. I smiled, saying, I couldn't miss Catherine's big moment. My words threw her off, but I didn't care. All eyes turned to the stage as the board chair, Dr. Margaret Lee, stepped up. Catherine prepared to accept her award, beaming like a queen. But Margaret didn't present it. Instead, she said, before we proceed, we must address a grave issue. She summoned Mark Ellison. Mark, with a deep, commanding voice, laid out the evidence before hundreds. The giant screen displayed forged IVF records, Catherine's recorded admission of sample tampering for neurological risks, and Pacific Ventures statements showing $250,000 funneled overseas. The room fell silent, save for Catherine's gasping breaths. These are severe violations of medical ethics and law, Mark said. Dr. Catherine Walsh will face investigation for medical fraud, financial crimes, and biological manipulation. Catherine stood frozen, face ashen. Ethan tried to grab her arm, but she shoved him away, eyes wild with panic. The board revoked her award on the spot, and whispers rippled through the room like waves. I left the summit right after. No need to watch Catherine crumble. I knew her next stop, Bella Not, the Italian restaurant where we celebrated our anniversaries, where she and Ethan planned to toast her victory. I arrived 20 minutes later, DNA envelope in hand, strangely calm. The restaurant was unchanged, white tablecloths, golden lights, soft opera music. The manager recognized me. Mr. Harper, been a while. Mrs. Walsh, said you might come. I nodded, walking to Catherine and Ethan's table, where they sat with an expensive bottle of red wine, the kind we drank for our 10th anniversary. Catherine saw me first, her eyes shifting from surprise to contempt. David, what are you doing here? She asked, voice laced with mockery. Ethan turned, face hardening but still confident. I thought you said I could come, I replied, voice soft. A polite gesture, but I didn't expect you to actually show, she said, lips curling. Ethan cut in. Maybe you should leave us alone, David. I smiled, locking eyes with Catherine. No, I think you both want to see this. I placed the DNA envelope on the table, sliding it toward her. Wonderwater, congratulations on your freedom, Catherine. Catherine opened the envelope, hands trembling slightly. As she read the results, probability of paternity 0%, her face contorted from shock, to disbelief, to horror. This can't be, she whispered. Ethan snatched the paper, eyes widening. What is this, Catherine? He asked, voice shaking. Just a fabrication, she snapped, trying to regain composure. David's making it up because he can't handle the divorce. I tilted my head, pointing to the restaurant door, where Margaret Lee and St. Clair board members entered, followed by Mark Ellison and 2 police officers. Then explain it to the board, I said, or the prosecutor's office, or Liam, Sophie, and Noah. Catherine paled, clutching the tablecloth. You're despicable, she hissed. Mark Ellison stepped forward, voice steady. Dr. Catherine Walsh, I'm arresting you for medical fraud, financial crimes, and violations of the Medical Act. He read her Miranda rights as an officer cuffed her. Ethan sat motionless, eyes vacant, as if his own revenge plot had unraveled. You planned everything. Catherine spat as she was led away. 15 years, Catherine, I replied. You had 15 years to live a lie. It took me 3 months to expose it. The restaurant went silent, diners stunned as Catherine was escorted to a police car. Ethan remained, staring at his full wine glass. I didn't know about the kids, he said, voice hoarse. I nodded. I believe you. He was Catherine's victim too, in his own way. I left Bella Knott, feeling not triumph, but release. I'd done what I had to, not just for me, but for my kids, for the truth. In the weeks following the Pacific Medical Summit, Catherine's story exploded across Seattle, from medical journals to mainstream media. Images of her in handcuffs leaving Bella Knott, eyes frantic, plastered every outlet. I, David Harper, once the invisible house husband, became the centerpiece of a bitter truth. Catherine Walsh, the celebrated neurosurgeon, had manipulated IVF, deceiving me and dozens of families. But I didn't seek the spotlight. I fought for Liam, Sophie, and Noah, and now I had to rebuild their lives, and my own. The legal fallout came swiftly. Catherine lost her medical license after a preliminary hearing. She faced multiple charges: medical fraud, financial crimes tied to Pacific Ventures, and Medical Act violations for IVF, sample tampering. St. Clair's IVF clinic was shut down indefinitely, triggering a sweeping investigation. Dozens of families contacted DNA labs, seeking the truth about their children. Some sued St. Clair, demanding compensation for lies that shattered family trust. I didn't join the lawsuits. I just wanted justice for Liam, Sophie, and Noah, and I'd achieved it. The court granted me full custody, a victory Emily Nguyen, my lawyer, called inevitable, given my evidence. Assets Catherine hid through Pacific Ventures, nearly $250,000, were frozen and traced by a forensic accountant. That money, plus other savings, went into a trust fund for Liam, Sophie, and Noah, securing their education and future. I moved from the Belltown apartment to a smaller one in Capitol Hill, simple but cozy, with rooms for the kids and a tiny yard for basketball. Every night, watching them laugh and play, I felt relief. Whatever their biological origins, they were my children, and I'd never let Catherine take that away. Rachel Thornton, Catherine's former colleague, reached out after the hearing. St. Clair was forming an ethics committee to oversee reproductive services when the clinic reopened. They want me to lead, she said, but I suggested we co-chair. Your perspective, as someone who's been hurt, is invaluable. The offer stunned me. For 15 years, I'd been Catherine's house husband, living in her shadow. Now, I was recognized for myself. I agreed, not just to reform the system, but to ensure no family endured what we did. Ethan Caldwell, Catherine's former lover, didn't escape unscathed. After his arrest at Bella Knott, he confessed to police about his revenge motive. His mother, Margaret Caldwell, died 5 years ago due to Catherine's surgical error during a valve replacement. Claire covered it up, blaming Margaret, but Ethan uncovered the truth through internal record. He changed his name, got close to Catherine, and became her lover to ruin her reputation. I wanted her to lose everything, he said at his hearing, voice rough. I didn't blame him. He was a victim too, but his path of revenge hurt too many, including me. I began rebuilding my life, step by step. I returned to teaching, taking a part-time role at a Seattle high school. Hours in the classroom, inspiring students, reminded me of who I was before sacrificing everything for Catherine. I also started writing an investigative series on the IVF scandal for a local paper. The articles drew attention, not just for the story, but for my honest, unbitter voice. A publisher offered me a book deal, and I'm considering it. For the first time in 15 years, I feel I'm living for myself, not someone else's shadow. But my priority remains Liam, Sophie, and Noah. I haven't told them about the DNA results. They're too young to understand, and I want to shield them from Catherine's storm. One night, eating homemade pizza in our new apartment, Sophie asked. Dad, will Mom come back? I smiled, brushing her hair. Mom has her own path, but I'll always be here. For all three of you. Liam and Noah nodded, as if that was enough. I know I'll have to explain the truth someday, but not now. For now, I want them to feel loved and safe. Looking back, I have no regrets. Catherine built a 15-year lie, and I tore it down, not with anger, but with truth. The new apartment, new job, ethics committee role, they're the start of a new David Harper, no longer defined by Catherine. I didn't seek revenge, but justice, and I found it. More than that, I found myself, a father. A man ready to move forward with confidence and hope. I sat on the couch in our new apartment, soft yellow light falling on Liam, Sophie, and Noah playing Monopoly on the floor. Their laughter rang out, a melody healing my heart. The apartment was smaller than Belltown's, but it was ours, a home free of Catherine's lies. After 15 years in her web of deceit, I, David Harper, finally felt true freedom. I haven't told the kids about the DNA results. Someday, when they're older, I'll gently explain that my love for them doesn't depend on biology. Liam, with his bright eyes, still asks about Mom, but Sophie and Noah seem content with our evenings baking or watching movies. Dad's a superhero, Noah said once, hugging me tightly. Those words meant more than any victory over Catherine. I looked out the window, Seattle's lights twinkling. I'm no longer the scorned house husband. I'm a father, a teacher, an ethics committee member, and maybe, one day, an author. The IVF scandal book is taking shape, but more importantly, I'm rewriting my own story. Catherine tried to trap me in her shadow, but I broke free. Not through vengeance, but truth. For Liam, Sophie, Noah, and myself, I step into the future with confidence and hope, ready for what lies ahead. David Harper's story, a devoted Seattle husband, mirrors real challenges in modern American life, where societal pressures, unequal family roles, and betrayed trust can thrust people into silent battles. David, who gave up teaching to support Catherine's rise as a neurosurgeon, faced betrayal not just through infidelity, but through an IVF secret, revealing Liam, Sophie, and Noah weren't his biologically. His journey, from finding the silk handkerchief in their Belltown apartment, confronting at the Pacific Medical Summit, to placing the DNA envelope at Bella Nodded, shows the power of perseverance and honesty in facing lies. In today's U.S., with divorce rates at 40 to 50% and complex family lawsuits, the story underscores protecting your and your children's rights through evidence and legal means, as David did with lawyer Emily Nguyen and agent Mark Ellison. Moreover, David's rebuilding, returning to teaching, joining an ethics committee, writing a book, reflects America's culture of recovery and self-reinvention post-crisis. Takeaway: face the truth, however painful, and use legal and community resources to protect your family. In America, where individual rights are valued, you can find support from lawyers, investigators, or friends like Rachel and Sarah to overcome betrayal. Above all, like David, prioritize your kids. His love for Liam, Sophie, Noah transcended biology, and believe you can rebuild from ashes, stronger than ever. Subscribe to the channel to follow justice journeys like David Harper's, and thank you for joining this emotional story. See you in the next video, where we'll uncover more secrets and heart-stirring truths.